Welcome to Doctors at Work. This podcast is part of my mission to help doctors create successful and meaningful careers. Today, we're talking about medic zombies. Ross McKean and I talk about how you can set yourself up for a satisfying career and not be a medic zombie going through life without noticing what's going on around you. He talks about the importance of reflection, of actively setting up strategies to protect yourself from the inevitable stresses, and of having quality connections with others. We discuss how important it is to take notice of what's going on, make conscious decisions, and actively be aware of the choices that we have. And whilst planning for the future matters, this cannot be done at the expense of blindly sacrificing the present. Welcome, Ross. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
All right, yes. So I'm Ross. I'm a GP in Cambridge. Very recently became a GP in January after, 10 years of training, locuming, working abroad, taking quite a circuitous path to get to this point. And it was the perception of realizing that when I stepped off the well-trodden path, I started to really enjoy medicine. And that was the beginning of my creation of my company, so passion project more, called Medizom, which is about being more human and not being a medic zombie as you are a doctor. Without my medic hat on then and being more human, I should say a bit more about that. So yeah, I live in Cambridge, originally from Scotland, where I used to really love taking photos and going around the Highlands of Scotland and doing hill walks and everything like that. Not so many hills in Cambridge. That was a shock to the system. It's a pretty flat and landlocked place. But I really love supboarding. That's really if I've got a day off, I'll be on the paddleboard on the River Cam. And a lot of the time that I devote to my free time is just pondering how we can live better and how I can be more than instead of do more. Perhaps we can delve into that as well.
Let's start with medic zombies. I love the terminology. Sort of it paints a picture in my mind, sort of what that is. Can you tell me what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I think it came from a realization that burnout for me is such a overused term, or it has the risk of being. It's been the buzzword of the time, especially since COVID. And I think people kind of switch off to that term and don't really appreciate how it can really feel. And I feel like being a medic zombie encapsulates how it can feel to really be burning and burnt out. So a medic zombie is someone that's sort of shuffling through their career, head down, disconnected from the patient in front of them, connected instead to their phone and other ways of disconnecting and distracting themselves, which can lead to your well of compassion drying up. And when it dries up for yourself, that's a real risk then that you're not able to extend any compassion to your patients. So by recognizing, it's quite a provocative term, you're a medic zombie, people can feel a bit defensive about that, and it's more to just create an entryway for having a reflection on some of your characteristics that might be having in common with a medic zombie, and then how you can be more human and find your own path. And those are the solutions that I come to the table with Medizom, the sort of thing that I see as the solution to being a medic zombie.
When you're in the middle of that, when you are a medic zombie, I'm wondering how do all of us realize that we're there? Do we have insight that that's where we are, or is it quite difficult to recognize that that's who you are?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly challenging, especially for us as doctors, especially those that have perhaps come to medicine straight from school, haven't had a lot of life experience, are quite used to following rules, following orders, suppressing how they are feeling internally just for maintaining the status quo. And I think that was a realization for me. I was very much that person. And my realization that I wasn't having that insight that I was a medic zombie was sort of a breakthrough for me. So everything in my body was saying that I shouldn't be on this path. So at the time, going back, I was in 2016. I was a core medical trainee, hated the job, and every fiber of my being was saying I shouldn't be doing this job. But actually, something wasn't connecting with my brain that I could actually leave that job. Everything had told me that it's what my employers expect, my mentor expects, my educational supervisor, my family, my friends. There wasn't really that expectation externally. It was all just internal. And it was only when a locum medical registrar said, "Why don't you just resign?" It was just felt like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulder, that actually that was a choice I could make. And then from there, I've been much more aware of making sure that I take the time just to have insight into what my body's saying and how I'm feeling, and being mindful before launching myself into a new career path.
So there's something there about when we're at work and there's this. I talk about this, the conveyor belt career. Yeah,
Yeah.
Sort of at the age of 16, you step onto a conveyor belt. Okay, maybe later, if you're a graduate entry, but for a lot of people at the age of 16 or even before, you step on a conveyor belt, and that conveyor belt start with A levels, in maths, biology, physics, and chemistry, and then you just sort of stay on a conveyor belt, and if it sounds like that's where you were, there was a path and you were on that path, and you didn't, that moment when sort of somebody says, "Why don't you resign?" That kind of sounds like a sort of a switch that says, "Hold on a second,
Yeah.
I do actually have a choice." Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's powerful.
Yeah, it was definitely a light bulb moment. And the thing is, I mean, it's not binary. You're not either burning out or fully firing on all cylinders. There is, you can sort of slide into it, and I think that the quicker you can recognize that and catch yourself, the quicker you can be kinder to yourself, forgive yourself for things that we always feel, and get back on the route to functioning.
If I think for me that for me there's a few telltale signs that I'm beginning to recognize, and maybe that it's easier sort of because I'm 50. I know I don't look a day older, Ross. Yeah.
No, you don't.
So,
You got a wrinkle at all.
I know, I got great skin, sort of. But I think as I'm getting older, I'm probably getting better at recognizing. And for me, it'll be things like, I'm eating rubbish, I'm not exercising, I'm not going out sort of with the dogs. Sort of, I'm staying up late. I like an early night. Staying up late doing work. I'm not staying up late watching Netflix. I'm staying up late working. Yeah, sort of, and everything's just a bit hard work. Like they for me, they're the signs that I've learned to recognize, that tell me that, okay, my balance, isn't what it should be at the moment. Yeah, I mean, what from your discussions with other people, I mean, how do people clock that something's wrong? Because when you're in the middle of it, like, you just don't see, do you? It's like, this is where I am. This is
no.
So what are sort of some of the things that you've heard people talk about, that people say, okay, I've clocked that I have a problem?
Yeah, a lot of them are exactly what you're saying. It is those disconnection things. So it might be overusing their phones, always turning to that between patients, just immediately going into the phone and just doom scrolling. Yeah, feeling like you have to, when you've had a long day at work, it's kind of this sadistic thing where you feel like, oh, I have to stay up later because I deserve to stay up later and have this time for myself, and eat badly and watch trash because I'm trying to make up for the pain in the day, and obviously then it's that problem with the lack of sleep, the lack of eating well, that compounds the problem the next day and increases the stress. And yeah, it's a real challenge. I think when I worked as a locum, you could see very easily, because you work inevitably in settings where it's a skeleton staff, and you're working with people that they can be quite prickly with you if you're making a referral, and the immediate first thing they say is medreg, like, not hello, my name is, like, you are more than a medreg. just remember to engage in normal conversation. We can have a friendly conversation, but you can tell, for example, in that setting, when you've got a specialist on the phone and they're not greeting in a normal way, they're already defensive and not identifying with their own name just by their position. That is a sort of red flag. Yeah.
I'm wondering then, what do we do about it? So, tell me, what are your thoughts about what needs to be done?
Yeah. So, I think so much of it is being able to recognize when we're trying to think our way out of situations. That's always what we end up doing, and I liken it to. So I had this event where I went on a long run, was running through nettles, unaware that I was running through nettles at the time. I was sprinting, had headphones on after a long day of work, and it was only towards the end of the run, slowed down, recognized the stings and pains, and it was overwhelming, the pain, but also because I was confused as to where I'd hit those nettles, and that was the realization then that you can't always think your way out of situations, and ruminating isn't helpful. Sometimes you've got to realize you've got to slow down, be aware that nettles will always sting you, but it's how you approach that. And I think a big thing is mindfulness. Again, it's kind of an overused cliched term, but that has been 100% the biggest thing to bring into my hobbies and days off, realizing just keep the phone away, all the things that are like Death Eaters for your attention and being in the moment, and having that presence of mind. So there's three things that Medizom really focuses on. It's reflection, protection, and connection. So in the reflection pages on the website, we reflect on how we can generate dysfunction in ourselves and become medic zombies, sometimes partly because of how society has trained us to be always thinking and always doing, but also realizing that, it's part of our conditioning, but we don't help ourselves often. Then it's reflecting on the system that we're in. So I use quite a lot of effective imagery in the slides on my site to kind of allow people to really effectively recognize how dysfunctional the NHS is at the moment, and how it really is a challenge to come through that unscathed, and actually to accept that you are probably going to have lots of cuts and nettle stings along the way, but it's how you react to that. And then it's reflecting on then what would be the flip version of what all this dysfunction is at the moment. What would the ideal thing look like? And that's partly looking at things that already exist in this world. There are certain countries that are doing it better, certain wards and departments that are more human in how they deliver their healthcare. So it's pointing a finger at those areas and actually celebrating that, instead of the doom and gloom of thinking how terrible it is at the moment. Actually, there are places and people doing it really well, and we should really applaud that and celebrate that and share that more widely. And then in the protect pages on the website, it's looking at a more effective patient-centered consultation. So I've come up with a consultation model which I use in my consultations, which I think really helps patients. And medical students have really enjoyed using this because it's not as prescriptive as the usual Calgary-Cambridge framework. And then there's a clinical toolkit, which is a separate thing where you can link to resources quickly to send to patients when time is not on your side. You've still got 4 patients in the waiting room that are, been waiting half an hour. Anything that calls back a bit of time, I think, is also a function of being more human, so you're not as stressed. So it's a library of different resources that clinicians can easily, through a few clicks, be able to copy and paste things to patients that are effective signposting and safety netting material. And then the final thing, is the connecting. So that's when you come in. I mean, you feature on the website as one of the really skilled career coaches. So we've got a couple of career coaches there. So it's realizing that it's a journey you don't have to go on your own, and a problem shared is a problem halved. So it's helpful to have people championing you. And also, in the same way as in the reflect pages, celebrating things that work well, this page also goes through clinicians that have been more human and found their own path. And again, you have a page there, don't you, with that talks about the struggles that you'd had with burnout and how you've managed to shape a role that really speaks to who you are and your values. And I think that's really powerful for medical students, especially, to be able to read that and see that you can shape it the way you like.
I'm interested in your consultation model. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah. So it's the Twerk consultation model.
But it gets even better. Does it involve dancing?
It doesn't actually involve the physical act of twerking with your patients. That would probably get you in front of the GMC, wouldn't it?
I don't think that would get you. I think that would give you an OBE. I hope you're enjoying the show. Please click subscribe so you'll be notified when new episodes become available. This podcast is part of my mission to help doctors create successful and meaningful careers. You can be part of that mission too by forwarding this show to one person who you think might benefit from listening. Thank you. Now on with the show.
So Twerk is a mnemonic which stands for thoughts, worries, evaluation, response, and knowledge. So the idea is that there are 3 main modes to a consultation. So there's the initial twerk of the patient, your twerk, and then the consultation twerk. So the patient's twerk is they have a stimulus. So that would be the symptoms that they experience. And that's when the twerk begins. So you have thoughts. So the thoughts are you telling a story to yourself of what these symptoms mean. Then that you will lump worry onto that. And if you're much of a worrier, then your threshold for, getting really worried about it and reactive about it might lead you to immediately phoning your GP practice. But then in the evaluation stage for the patient, they might speak to friends, go on ChatGPT. They might use the tool of time to see if my symptoms next week are still there or worse, then I'll speak to my GP. And then the response is my worry less, the same, or more? And that would then action them to seek knowledge. So knowledge being where they're seeking to understand themselves better and the symptoms they have better. And then the doctor's twerk is the stimulus for us is before the patient's even entered the room is those few lines of the triage notes saying, patient has had abdominal pain for 4 days, and that sparks off thoughts. So if 4 days of abdominal pain doesn't sound too worrying, but if they had X, Y, and Z, I would be worried. So they think about what worries you with someone that's got abdominal pain for 4 days. And then the evaluation there is looking at the patient's notes, looking at clinical letters, knowing what medication they're on. So doing your homework before the patient comes in the room, so that you then know from your response if you're worried, less worried, more worried, so that then you have the knowledge on how to deliver the consultation well. And then the consultation proper is where you allow the patient to tell their story. So they get their thoughts out on the table. You ask them how worried they are, and then you go on to your evaluation. And then your response is recapping what we've talked about, talking about your evaluation with the patient, and then coming up with your response of what you think the potential diagnoses are, and then sharing the knowledge. And I have to be careful here, because we're not seen as these. I thought initially when I came into GP land that if I just lecture the patient on what I think is going on, and this is what we're going to do, and saying, "Are you okay with that?" At the end, that was shared decision making, but it is much more of a collaborative approach. So I sort of break down that final knowledge bit into 4 things. So saying, based on what we know so far, these are the likely things that are going on. So that's the K of knowledge. These are the necessary things we need to think about. These are the optional things we need to think about. And then the W for the no mnemonic within that Twerk, lots of mnemonics, is what now, what next, what if, and what then. And you should be able to answer those 4 questions at the end of a patient consultation to know that you're wrapping it up nicely and they feel listened to.
Wow, I love that sort of that. You should write that up. That's brilliant.
Yeah, and that's as I said, Medizom's a passion project, and it's something that I keep coming back into, adding a few more pages, and then thinking, no, I don't want this paradoxically to actually be making me a medic zombie by spending too much time on it. So then I leave it for a bit, add a bit more when I've got the reserves, and yeah.
And clearly, it shows that there's years worth of content and thought and insight that's gone into that. Yeah, and I know we've known each other a number of years, and I think what you've outlined in that really demonstrates that there is years and years worth of content, insight, and thought gone into that. Can I come sort of back to mindfulness? Because I think you're right. Whenever anybody uses the word, I just think people just roll their eyes and groan. But I think you were telling me about the benefit of it. Can you tell me a bit more what you mean by mindfulness, and why should people pay attention rather than just groan?
Yeah, it kind of comes back to the analogy of running through a path where there's lots of obstacles in your way, and recognizing that if we're head down, headphones in, not paying attention, that's when we suffer from pain. And so mindfulness is really about getting rid of all those distractions and using your senses to your greatest benefit. So I sort of see it was a really powerful recognition, and something that I really valued from listening to Eckhart Tolle. He's a wonderful practitioner of mindfulness, and he's got some great content on YouTube. It's recognizing that thoughts and worries are separate from you, and you are the awareness behind your thoughts and your feelings. So I sort of see it as like grumblebees around your head, so these thoughts and worries are buzzing around your head, but actually you can turn those grumblebees into humblebees by seeing the thought, like seeing, right, okay, I'm aware of this, but if you keep it in your awareness and recognize that it's something separate from who you are, well, you must be not that thought, not that worry. So you take the sting out the grumblebee and make it a humblebee, and then it can just fly away, and it's not part of your identity anymore. Yeah.
It's interesting because if I think for my related concept is, the conveyor belt, yeah, sort of
Mm,
in the sense that we are, or I am, or you are, whoever, but I am on a conveyor belt, and I just step on, and then sort of stuff happens, and I've no idea.
yeah.
I don't pay attention. I don't see it. I don't think, sort of stuff. I'm just standing there, and then I'm not intentional in terms of what I'm doing. I'm not paying attention.
Mm,
What am I doing? So and the I guess the relevance is, to when you talk about your own decision making early on, when you sort of say, actually I have a choice, yeah, and
yeah.
that kind of, for me, is really powerful. So it's not being on autopilot, it's not being on conveyor belt, it's not being a zombie when you're
Mm,
just doing stuff, and you don't notice the world around you, don't pay attention, it's sort of, it's head down, you just keep going. But that intentionally pausing and thinking of making a choice, and sort of saying, okay, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to pay attention to or not, as the case.
mm,
But those choices, I mean, why
mm.
is consciously making choices so powerful?
I think because, yeah, it's as you say, when we're on autopilot, we always revert to, I'll be okay when I'll be okay when when I've qualified as a doctor. Then it's pushed back more. I'll be okay when I've finished my foundation years, or I've become a registrar, or become a consultant. But it never stops. That light at the end of the tunnel will always stretch if that's your way of coping with it. Um, because all those habits of that you're sacrificing the present moment to make up for the fact that it'll be okay. I'll eat worse and I'll sleep worse, but there's that light at the end of the tunnel. But we are a function of all our habits. So if years have worked into those habits, it's
Yeah.
a real challenge, even when you've reached that milestone, to stop having that uh, looking to the future for your salvation.
Yeah.
um yeah.
So I
Does that
guess
answer the question? I'm not sure.
I'm thinking, there are people who are going to be listening and say, well, that's fine, but I need to pass my exams, and I need to save for my house, and I need to look at where I'm going to have the job. So some people are going to say, well, I do need to think about the future. I can't just sort of try and enjoy today.
Yeah.
So where would you say is the balance between planning for the future and investing in your future, versus sacrificing the present? Where's the
Yeah.
balance?
I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong with planning for the future, but I think it's just gone so much the other way, and so much into planning and doing, and time blocking on days off, trying to fill it with loads of things to keep you productive, that we don't allow ourselves to have those moments of being, going on long walks, being in nature, just getting out of our own little dramas in our head, and seeing a bigger picture. Yeah.
So something that there's got to be an element of both, because if you spend all your time thinking I'll be okay, when I qualified as a GP, and you never get there because you burn out in the process and leave,
Yeah.
that's no good. Yeah, I'm guessing also sort of the it's perhaps it's the difference. Maybe again we're back to that sort of perhaps intentionality, that sort of saying,
Hmm.
okay, I am giving up this weekend because I have to do my exam, and that's a conscious decisions that you've intentionally made, and you've calculated and said the purpose of this weekend is the exam. And the difference in a zombie is that the zombie doesn't think. The zombie just head is down, and you just go through life. You don't pay attention. You don't consciously make decisions. You don't notice. You're on a conveyor belt, and you don't consciously decide, because the decision might be, I do this in the service of, or I'm not going to have a holiday in order to save for my mortgage. But they're all conscious decisions that one makes, as opposed to just automatic, I'm a zombie, I'm not thinking what I'm doing.
Yeah. And I think, it's when you accept that pain chronically that you really do yourself a disservice. So actually being really kind to yourself, allowing yourself to, go for a massage, a bit of self-care and stuff. After resigning from the core medical job and locuming, going to a nice gym and going to take care of myself more and go on holidays more, that actually meant that when I came back to work, I was replenished, and I felt like I could actually be present and connect with patients without just thinking of them as roadblocks, and using your roadblocks and rainbows and how you see patients. You can see those patients more like rainbows rather than roadblocks.
I wonder if I could bring us to a close, and maybe if I could ask you to summarize and tell me what are your top tips for doctors at work.
So main thing is how to be more human and find your own path, and it's a process, and it's one of self-compassion and one of curiosity in what you might be thinking and feeling. To always remember that you're not on that journey alone, and there are people like yourself and around. You can probably find easily through your trust, pastoral care, and I think it's really important to use that. So build an army around you to ensure that you're working for your values and you're working on your terms. And remember that work isn't everything. You will be a better doctor for that realization, and you'll be a better friend, a better, everything with that realization.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Ross.
Thank you.